Okay, hello everyone, and thank you for coming. This presentation is based on my experience in the first Intifada as an activist, and on interviews with the leaders of the first Intifada and Palestinian Authority officials, I would say, conducted by myself and by my colleague. He's a co-author with me, Dr. Ghassan Al-Khatib from Birzeit University. Well, to understand why we are in this situation now, I think we have to go back to the first Intifada. My generation and myself, we were big supporters of the two-state solution. But the two-state solution that we supported was not the two-state solution that we are talking about now. It was different. When the first Intifada started, it involved all segments of society. Everybody was involved in the first Intifada. And the reason for that is that everybody was subject to the repressive measures of Israel. There were no distinct class or VIPs. We were all under the same oppressive measures. Prolonged curfews included professionals, workers, children. Everybody was subject to that. So now the first Intifada, as you probably all know, bruised Israel's image internationally. And Israel was unable to crush it. It was bottom up. The leadership that was formed, called the Unified Leadership, was in harmony with the national consensus, was part of the people. We were all together in the streets protesting the occupation, along, by the way, with peace activists from Israeli peace activists. We all called for the end of occupation and the two-state solution. However, the Palestinian leadership, the local leadership of the Intifada, built a strategy that started with the issue of Jerusalem, the illegal Israeli settlements, and the right of return to 1948, by the way, not to 1967. That was, and according to international law, according to UN Resolution 194. This is new to us, that is Palestinian refugees to go back to 67. So the Palestinian local leadership insisted on a comprehensive solution for Palestinians. Yes, accepted the two-state solution. However, the core issues that were compromised by the PLO were top priority for the Palestinian leadership. Now, Israel played like any colonial rule, divide and rule. They went to the Palestinian leaders in prisons, because Israel arrested leaders and activists, and said to them, let's conclude an agreement and bypass the PLO, forget the PLO. But they refused, they rejected. Then, maybe you all know, there's no time to talk about this, when the first Gulf War started, and the US was enthusiastic about a process, Israel agreed to go to Madrid, but the condition was not to include PLO members, only local Palestinians from the West Bank and Gaza Strip, excluding Jerusalem. So, and then concluded to Washington talks. In Washington talks, when Palestinians started to negotiate with Israelis, they didn't go anywhere. And they were described by the chief negotiator, Uri Savir, as rigid. So they started the secret channel in Oslo. And they isolated the Palestinian leaders in Oslo using arm twisting, also divide and rule. Even Abu Ala or Ahmad Qurea, in his recollection of what happened in Oslo, he felt that Palestinians thought Israel wanted to keep the Washington Channel alive because they wanted to bypass the PLO. So they were under this feeling that they might be discarded. And the PLO was feeling threatened by the local leadership. So they wanted to lead a role. Okay? So during Oslo, this leadership started to compromise because Israel used a psychological tactic in negotiations. First of all, they made them feel that, Rabin is in a rush, and he needs to convince the people of Israel, that the security of the people of Israel is paramount. So you have to tango with us. Otherwise, and this is the only government that is able to make peace with you. Otherwise, you lose it. And then 3 months later, when they tried to convince the negotiators that still Rabin did not endorse Oslo officially. So the Palestinian negotiators in Oslo started to feel the urgency to try and convince Rabin to accept the negotiations officially. So after 3 months, when they signed the initials about recognition of each other, the Palestinian leadership in Oslo thought that this was a big achievement, that now it is official. Now Rabin government endorsed Oslo. So that's what happened inside the secret channels. When we interviewed the leaders of the first Intifada, they told us that they said to us that they were in a better position to negotiate with the Israelis because they know the colonial mentality of the Israelis better than those who were in exile in Lebanon and Tunisia. They don't understand. They told us that they have experience in prison and they know the mentality, the colonial mentality of Israel. So while the leaders of the PLO leaders, let's refer to them, they understood or were able to understand the security, the importance of security to Israel. The Palestinian leaders of the first Intifada thought that this was the problem. The problem is the security matter, and we have to start there. That's why during the first Intifada in 1988, the first Intifada rejected Schultz's initiative, which was autonomy. It was a proposal of autonomy. The Palestinians rejected it because they thought that the Israelis will still patrol the streets, will still have the upper hand, no right of return for the refugees. Jerusalem will be out of the deal. That's why they rejected it. So what the first Intifada rejected, and the first Intifada is what led to Oslo, was accepted in the secret channels in Oslo agreement. That's why, as I said, Uri Savir described the negotiators in Washington as rigid, while described the PLO negotiators in Oslo as surprisingly flexible. Now, it's amazing how when they started the negotiations in Oslo, that it did not start with Uri Savir as an official and representative of the government. It started with academics, Yair Hirschfeld and Ron Pondak. And Yair Hirschfeld told Abu Ala, Ahmad Qurea, he said to him, listen, before we start, Jerusalem has to be out of the negotiations. As a matter of fact, the government of Rabin is surprised how you agreed with the Likud to exclude representatives from Jerusalem in Madrid, and now we cannot change it. So it has to remain like that. Also, Yair Hirschfeld told Abu Ala, why are you so concerned about the closures? When Abu Ala brought up the closures and especially the closure of Jerusalem, which started before Oslo, you should look at it positively. This is the meaning of the two-state solution. This is the meaning of division. That's why the closure is there. Also, you talk about the workers who lost their jobs. About 120,000 workers lost their jobs in Israel. Look at this positively. These people will be the pillars of the Palestinian economy when we reach an agreement. So lots of art twisting, lots of ambiguity during the Oslo process. But and local Palestinians were excluded totally after that, when Israel thought that, yes, here the PLO is going to compromise, we don't need the Washington channel anymore. And then they reached this mutual recognition, recognizing the PLO. And it's funny, because when they wanted to sign it in the White House, the PLO was not mentioned in the documents. And there was a problem. It has to be delayed until they fixed it. So the deception throughout Oslo is continuing until today. Everything is in the name of peace. Everything is, if you want peace, let's do this. The security cooperation. I mean, the security cooperation for the Israeli negotiators, they made it clear during Oslo process. Security is sacred, and you have to tango with us on this. You have to fight terrorism. And this is also ambiguous, because now, if there is a resistance against the occupation, easily it's called terrorism. It's in the agreement. You have to fight it. For us, this is terrorism. It threatens our security. So this is what happened, and this is what is continuing until today. I mean, when the PNA was established in 1994, when they came back to Gaza, and the Palestinians call it Black Friday, they killed 13 Palestinians who protested. And this is continuing, as Ala just explained. So the problem is, if we compare it, the transparency. The Palestinian local leadership in the first Intifada was transparent and in tune and in harmony with the national consensus. While the Palestinian, the PLO in Oslo, it was a surprise for us. And I must admit, I supported Oslo, but before I read it, and before I experienced the consequences of Oslo on the ground. And the reason, it's not only me, all of my generation. And the reason for that is because we trusted the PLO. And we always thought that the PLO is our sole representative and wouldn't, in a million years, compromise our rights. That was the reason. As a matter of fact, Abu Ala, in his book, or Ahmad Kureya, he mentions that Ahmad Ghunaim told the PLO leaders, we supported Oslo, but we didn't read it because we trust you. However, now, the way we live, the fragmentation of the land, not only it's the fragmentation of the land, it is every single aspect of Palestinian daily life is controlled by Israel, now coupled with cooperation with the PNO, with the PNA. So the situation now is not only about what shall we do with Oslo. The situation now is that Oslo is so entrenched and the consequences of Oslo is so entrenched, not only in the West Bank and in the Gaza, the consequences of Oslo also in the Gaza Strip. However, I must say that resistance is continuing, and as Ilan said, it's not up to the leaders, it's up to the people. It's not up to the Western countries anymore. I don't know how Britain, for example, that imposed on us the establishment of the Israeli state, now is still in the same mentality, trying to impose on us what is the best for Palestinians by accepting that refugees go to the 67 without asking the refugees what they want. This refugee community, they have a voice and they can say what they want to do. It's not up to Western power to impose the solution. Zero? Okay, so what I mean is that resistance is continued. I mean, there is also cooperation between us and Israelis who now believe in full rights for Palestinians, even better than the first Intifada, by the way. Because in the first Intifada, when we cooperated with Israeli peace groups, we did not discuss the details. And we had Zionists who wanted to end the occupation, but we did not discuss the details. When the refugee issue started to surface, many of those activists disappeared. However, now those who cooperate with Palestinians, protesting the wall in Bel'ain, in Jahalin, they all endorse the full rights for Palestinian people. Thank you.